Hey, and welcome to my garden. Today we're going to cover the 5 beginning tips of starting your own garden. Let's go check it out. Alright, here we go. The first tip of starting your own garden is going to be location. So you want your garden to be close to your house, because the closer it is to your house, the easier it's going to be for you to go out there, enjoy it, and maintain it. Too far and you might get a little too lazy, so try to get it close to your house if you can. Probably the second most important thing in the location of your garden is the source of water. We decided to put our garden next to this lawn hydrant here, so that way it's easy to get every point of the garden with a hose. So determining where to put your garden is probably going to be most dependent upon where the sun is. So from here you have east this direction, and obviously the sun's going to go this way to the west end. So the plants here in the garden are getting sun for most of the day. So when I first started gardening, I had a small area to work with, and a lot of people complain that they might not have enough space to start a garden. So I recommend doing square foot gardening, and that's such a great way of putting a lot of plants into a tight space, which also helps with weeds. So I don't do square foot gardening throughout my garden just because it's pretty sizable, but here's an example of what square foot gardening could look like. You can see I have a bunch of bean plants. They're almost at the end of their producing right now, but you can pack 9 bean plants in a square foot area. And by doing that, you're getting maximum yields from so many plants, but also keeps the weeds down. So definitely recommend square foot gardening for most gardeners. Number 2 tip would be watering and weeding. Now, I'm not a purist. As you can see, I have quite a bit of weeds, especially in the walkways. When you first get your plants and seeds in the ground, it's important to weed there because you don't want the weeds to overcrowd the plants. But once the plants are sizable, once they're big, you don't have to worry about weeding as much because, especially if you're doing square foot gardening, the plants start to overcrowd the weeds. So with weeding, you're really just trying to prevent the weeds from overcrowding the plants. So as I walk through, occasionally I will pull some weeds if I see them, especially if they're going to go to flower. You don't want them to go to seed. But generally, I try to do one big weeding effort maybe once a month or so. But I'm a busy man, so I can't be spending all my time weeding, you know what I mean? So with watering, I prefer to do a deep water method. In doing that, you come out less frequently to water. Because let's face it, water could take a long time. So with deep watering, I'll try not to get the dog wet. So you're going to put a hefty amount of water in each bed. So as I'm watering the beans and a couple tomatoes and some peppers here, you're going to get this pretty saturated. Mostly aiming for the roots as much as you can. So I'd be here for a while yet. And then I'll let this soak and I'll go to another bed here. And I'll do the same thing over here. And once I'm done over here, I'm going to come back once again, get another round of water here. And doing it like this type of a method, I generally water twice a week. And if we have a good amount of rain, then I can water less. So that really helps with your time spent. Another thing that helps with both watering and weeding is using some sort of a mulch on top of the dirt. So in here you can see that we use some leftover grass clippings from mowing the lawn, and a decent amount, as you can see there. So this helps. You can see that not as many weeds are coming up in this area, and it also helps preserve the water from evaporating, especially in the heat of the summer. This also has the added benefit of, as this breaks down, it becomes really nice stuff for the soil there too. So speaking of soil, that's the number 3 tip, having healthy soil. Just like you like to eat healthy things, your plants do too. So what's your soil like? Take actually a shovelful of soil and let's see what it looks like, right? It should be kind of crumbly, it should be kind of moist. You should see worms. Those are all signs of healthy soil. Especially when you're getting started, like this garden's just 2 years old. As you compost, that'll enrich the health of your soil. Right, Leo? So what we're doing here is I add compost every spring and fall, and over time, that soil health gets better. This bed I just started last year. It's getting there. These beds in the middle here are 2 years old now, and you can see a difference between what these look like compared to what a newer one looks like. But within 2 years or so, you're gonna have some really rich soil. So as I mentioned, compost really helps the soil health. So when we started composting, we used this tumbler, and it's easy to put plant clippings and food waste, as long as it's not meats or fats, but all the vegetable and fruit matter that you have into something like a tumbler here, and then just every now and then give it a couple spins, make sure it's moist. You want to aim for like a damp, like a sponge, and this will turn into some really rich soil that your plants love. And we also have the added benefit of having chickens and horses, and they add quite a bit of manure to our composting. My fourth tip for beginning gardeners is the type of plants you want to plant. So things like peppers and tomatoes are typically easy to grow and usually one of the first plants that you choose. But really focus on plants that you and your family really like eating. In my case, I love hot peppers. I just really enjoy making hot sauce. So I dedicate a lot of my beds to growing different types of chili peppers. Once you determine what plants that you want to put into the ground, the next thing you're going to determine is where you're going to plant them. So one thing to keep in mind while determining that is, again, with the sun's orientation. So in this example, this is south facing. You want generally your taller plants in the back. So as you can see here, I have some squash and some melons. They're going to be shorter, closer to the ground. And I have the tomatoes behind them. That way the tomatoes aren't casting shade onto the squash plants, for example. But the flip side of that would be things like lettuces actually kind of like more shade, especially in the heat of the day. So planting things like lettuces behind the tomatoes actually gives them a bit of a shade and cooler, especially during midday here. And my fifth tip for beginning gardeners is how to harvest your produce. So generally, I prefer mostly freezing and canning, with the bulk of my stuff being frozen. So I use a stand-up freezer and put my produce in there. And it's easy to just, once you gather things like beans, to blanch them quickly, dry them off, put them in a freezer bag, and then put them in the freezer. That type of preserving will keep them fresh for about a year. That way you're locking in all those nutrients. So I hope those 5 tips help you start and plan a successful first garden. Gardening's such a great hobby. It's fun, it's healthy, and it helps the environment as well as your wallet. So good luck, and I wish you the best.